Good to go. So where was I?
A year later, your brother was born.
Well, he was born 1914. 13 years later, my sister was born. 2 years later, I was born. So she was born in 37. I was 27. I was born in 1929. They had another child somewhere in there. I don't know when, but the child didn't survive. She miscarried, or he died at birth, or one of those things. So we were really the only 3 children that grew up. My parents were very active, and that's where they got the clock. They were very active in an organization that still exists today called the Workmen's Circle. It's a leftist-leaning organization, which means more socialist than Republican, so to speak, okay? And they were very active in that, and so that's the way we were brought up. The Workmen's Circle had a summer camp outside of Los Angeles. They had bought or leased 100 acres of land in Carbon Canyon. And so we used to go there during the summer. We would go there for picnics and, to visit with friends and so forth in the summertime. When my brother was old enough, he became a counselor at the camp. And when my sister and I grew into that age group, we became counselors also. Some of those people, and this was in the early 40s, 43, 44, 45, somewhere in there, it's when it started for us. Some of those people, some, are still alive, and we keep in touch, that group of people. I mean, how long ago was that? Who's a mathematician?
What'd you say, 45?
Long time ago, from 44 or 42 to, what's that, 50,
70?
60 years?
Yeah, like
70,
60.
70.
60.
60, yeah, 60 is more like it. No, it's 70.
It's 68
Yeah,
years.
it's like 60 something, yeah, 68.
Yeah, around 65 years old. Okay, and most of them live in the Los Angeles area, and so they get together 2-3 times a year when they feel like it. And so once in a while, we've been here in Texas for 22 years. 1980 we moved here. And so once in a while I'll fly out and I'll visit with them, spend a couple of days in LA. But it's wild that you could still see people that you knew that many years ago. Wild concept. Unfortunately, each year somebody's no longer with us. Just the nature of it. Okay, so that's the Workman's Circle and that group and so forth and here. When I was 10, 12 years old, I started playing the trumpet, and I was pretty good at it apparently. And a fellow by the name of Lenny Niehaus went to high school with me, or I with him. I think he's a year older. Very, very good musician. And he eventually became a fine, fine musician, well known all over the world, in fact, and has written the movie scores to many movies and television stuff and so forth and so on. I have a picture in my archives of a little orchestra that assembled relative to the music school that I was going to. And he was playing oboe in that orchestra. He may have started on either piano or violin. His father was a piano tuner, and his sister was a pianist. And so Lenny started early on, and he was obviously very talented. And so he had a dance band in high school. And one of them, couple older guys than I was, somehow got hooked up with, this was in East LA. There were some guys who were starting a band in West Side of LA, the more perhaps affluent section of Los Angeles, and they hired four of us, me and Lenny and Norton Maltz, the other trumpet player, and a bass player. Can't think of his name at the moment. So four of us got into that band, and I was 14 years old, and we played professionally. And we became the house band at the Hollywood Canteen. This was during the war. And so there were lots of servicemen in Los Angeles coming or going or whatever. And so some of the big movie stars and people like that started this kind of nightclub for the servicemen who would be in LA for a few days. And so our band played there at least once a week. That's all I can remember. We played there regularly. I have a certificate signed by Betty Davis, who, very well-known actress during those years, even until recently. And she was like the president of the Hollywood Canteen or something. And so I got a certificate signed by her. Got a lot of other certificates. While I was going to school, maybe junior high or high in those years, I was studying trumpet at a music school they charged money based on what you could afford to pay. If you could afford $1, you paid $1. If you could afford $5, you paid $5, $3, whatever it was. And they raised the rest of the money out in the community. For all I know, people went free. I'm saying that you pay what you could afford. And so they would have some of us, go and play concerts in places and show the community how great job they were doing, and people would donate money. So that's where they got a lot of their money. They used to have concerts at the school, probably every week, I'm thinking. So you studied with your teacher, and he gave you a solo, and for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it took you, you worked on that solo, and then you played at the recital with 10 other kids. And so it got to where, it was pretty easy. You just get up and do your thing, And anyway, I also entered a contest given by the PTA for music students. I entered the contest, and I won something. I don't know if I was first or second or whatever it was, but I won a year's worth of lessons with the first trumpet player of the LA Philharmonic.
Oh, nice.
And it was Benjamin Klatskin, a Russian Jew. Be quiet, we're busy. And he didn't teach well. He played very well, or he wouldn't have kept that job. He knew how to do that, but he didn't know how to teach. He didn't know how to tell you what to do if something was not a good teacher. So I didn't stay beyond the 1 year's worth of lessons. I just opted not to go back to him again. That's about as much as I can think about the teenage years and like that. I was living at home with my father, my sister, and father and sister. My mother died in, I think, 1957. So that makes me, 16 years old, something like that, right? It would be 18, because I'm going 29. So she might have died. Oh, she was 57. So whatever it was, I was 15 years old, almost 16 years old, and my mother died. So just my father and me and my sister. My brother was long gone. He was 15 years older. He was married and, long gone. And we lived in that house. And my sister was like, she kept house for the two of us. And in due course, my sister got married. She married a guy that we met in this summer camp that I told you about that we used to go to. And his name is Martin. the family name was Augustowski, but as it happened quite often, they shortened the name to make it more American, and so he became Martin August. Well, Marty is still alive. Marty, my brother-in-law, even though my sister's been gone for many years, lives in a retirement facility in North Richmond, some city in the valley. I can't think of the name of it. Northridge. And he always comes to the lunches that I talked about, but he can hardly walk, can't get up by himself. You have to pick him up from a chair. I mean, he's really arthritis, or really bent over and all that crap. And he's pretty near deaf. And the guy, but he's hanging in there. And he's probably 85 years old. When I was growing up, people didn't live this long. You lived in your 60s. The normal retirement age was 65. I mean, that was just the way it was. And people lived 2, 3, 4 years after that. I'm not saying everybody, you know, but the majority of people lived another 2, 3 years and they died. My brother's wife is still alive. She's 93 years old. We call her Aunt Esther. I mean, she's your aunt. I think you've met her.
Yeah.
Yeah. She recently moved to Bend, Oregon with Lois. Did you know that?
No,
No,
that's
I didn't
cool.
know that.
Well, that's an interesting thing. She, a couple of years ago, she started showing dementia. In case you don't know what that is.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, it was starting to get, progressively worse. And Lois realized that she couldn't be alone all the time, as she had been. So she started having somebody come in and help her out. And her neighbors were glorious to her. Glorious. They loved her. Everybody loved her. She was very vivacious and friendly and all that. Well, Lois got engaged to a fellow who was working in LA for a couple of years, 3 years, and a long-term job that he had. But his home is in Bend, Oregon. So at that certain point, he said, look, I want to go back to Bend. And she said, okay, we're going to do it, but I have to take my mother. Because she couldn't just abandon Esther. So I don't know, 6 months ago, something. They packed up and they moved to Bend, Oregon, and put Esther into a facility. Yeah,